Okay, guys. So as I mentioned today, we're going to be doing something really, really special. So I have my wife, Sima Acharya, on the show today. Sima proposed a really good idea. Sima, you said that it would have been a great idea if you came on for the 50th episode and you interviewed me. We didn't get to the 50th episode, but here we are. Episode number 77, I think.
Yeah, I know. It took us about 27 episodes to get together, which is surprising because we live in the same house, but we couldn't coordinate our schedules. But I'm so excited to be here today on the pod. I'm pretty sure it's safe to say I've been your longest fan. And today I get to put you in the hot seat.
Yeah, that's
So,
right.
needless to
That's right.
say, I'm super excited to be here and to be hosting you on Beyond MD.
Yeah, no, no, I'm really excited to do this too. Um, I was gonna make a joke, and I thought that you really enjoyed up until episode 6, and then the interest maybe faded away, but it's all good. So why don't you, Sims? Why don't you tell people about yourself a little bit? I think they've heard a lot about you in little snippets on the podcast, but tell us a bit about yourself so people know.
Yeah, for sure. So, I guess professionally, I've been in the HR strategy and transformation space for about 15 years. So, my career there started in consulting, working for a big four company, helping big companies go through a lot of change. And then from there, my career led me into banking and financial services, where I was in that industry for about 6 years in the HR function, but getting to do a lot of work across HR strategy, people operations, and large scale M&A, which was really exciting. And I got to a point more recently where I was feeling like I needed a change. And so I decided to take the summer off, and it was the perfect summer to take off to be with our boys, Rohan and Zion. They themselves were about to embark on some personal change in that they were going to be going to a new school in September. And I thought, what better way than just to spend a full summer with them, really just like soak up all of the experiences and memories. And coincidentally, you also had a lot of time off yet than this
Hmm.
summer. So
Hmm.
it was the best summer. I had time to spend with you and the boys, along with just spending time with myself and reflecting on where I want my career to go, which I feel like I've landed on. And so I'm really excited for kind of what's to come in the very near future.
So for somebody who's maybe contemplating, you know what, I'm really grinding it out right now. I don't know if what's in front of me is necessarily the path forward, and I'm contemplating a break. Like, what would your advice be? Because sometimes it's not that it's frowned upon, but it could be hard to take action and just say, I need a break for myself. What would your advice be?
I would say listen to yourself. So, like, be okay and be okay with taking that risk, taking that time off. Because realistically, it's really hard to think about the next thing that you want to do career wise when you're in your current role. And so I do believe, and I wouldn't have been a proponent of this like 3 months ago, but now having just finished that 3 month time away, I could say it is the best possible thing that you can do for yourself to give yourself that time and space to think and reflect and really figure out what it is that you want. Because at the end, you're gonna set yourself up for success to actually go and get it.
I know I've told you this. I've also told people in conversations, but I also do want people to know, like the steps that you took for yourself to figure out a path. I'm really proud of you for taking those steps because it's not always easy to do so. So I should probably stop asking questions and maybe hand it over to you now. So feel free to ask me anything on this podcast, and I hope that people will learn something from my journey and what I've picked up over the last few years.
Yeah, amazing. So I guess I know in your podcast you always start off by asking your guest. So I have to start by asking, where does the pod find you today? But I know where I can find you. You're in our basement right now, recording this podcast. So I will take that. I will take that question
Yeah,
off of your
yeah,
plate,
yeah.
and we can dive right into the
I,
fun
I, I
stuff.
think
So
that kind of happened because when I started recording, everybody was still remote. And I found like some people would be in really interesting locations, and I thought it would add a really interesting element to the conversation right off the bat. So that's why I started it. Now a lot of people are back at work. I've gotten to know my network, so I'm starting to ditch that one, but it's all good. Yeah,
That must be a result of me only listening to episode 6.
yeah, that's right. There you go.
Confessions come out.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so Yethan, I really want your listeners over today's episode to learn more about you, to learn more about your financial journey, what you've learned along the way,
Mhm.
and then looking ahead, how you see yourself evolving, not only this podcast, but also you and your ways as you continue to kind of build your financial acumen, broaden your network, and just build deeper expertise in the area of
Mhm. Mhm.
finance. And so perhaps to start, let's take a look back. So I remember back in 2020 during the pandemic, you turned to me and you said, Seema, I have this idea to create a resource that would educate my peers across healthcare on financial literacy. I see there's a gap today, and I feel like I am impassioned to fill this gap with something to help my
Mhm.
colleagues. And I remember when you shared that with me, immediately I was like, just do it. You got to do it. And before I knew it, you had figured out how to download the software. You bought yourself a fancy mic. You kind of you got yourself all ready to launch this new podcast, Beyond MD.
Mhm.
So, can you share a bit more with your listeners on some more information about that decision? What were you not seeing out there, and how did you feel like this particular podcast would help fill that gap?
That's a great question. So one thing I will say, and how you phrase that question, really interesting. It made me think of something right away. So one of the reasons, like I want people to know this, why I view Seema and I as a really good team, is we balance each other out. Seema, you know that I overthink things a lot, and there have been many times in our marriage. We met now 13 years ago, and there have been many times where I will overthink something and I won't take action. This is one of those scenarios where I did a quick Google search, I ran it by you, and then I just decided to take action. So that's one thing. And you've always been, I think, better than me at doing that, not overthinking and actually putting that foot forward. So we balance each other out really well. But back to the pod, as you know, from the times we try to sit down and watch a movie, I get really restless. I get twitchy when I'm not exercising my mind and doing things. So, April 2020, I worked about 4 or 5 days in the hospital. And I remember those days. I was on my phone, on my Yahoo Finance app, looking at stocks, and I was just like, well, I know I'm getting really interested in this, but there's got to be another way for me to continue doing some good for the world and having an impact. And so that was my motivation for starting the pod at that time. Yes, my interest in finance had been growing. A lot of it actually happened from me talking to my accountant, Alan, and we would have a lot of back and forth. And I figured through those conversations, there's more for me to know. And I really do sense that there's more for our community of physicians and healthcare practitioners to know because, everywhere I trained, medical school, residency, especially fellowship and my early staff years, I found that the people around me, they all had the same questions. How should I be investing my money? Should I be buying a house right now? Should I be renting? Do I need a financial planner? What kind of questions should I be asking the planner? Do I need to do other things? These questions came up again and again and again. And I said, there's got to be a way. So I said, let me try to interview subject experts. It'll be a great opportunity for me to learn. And let me just share what I learn with everybody else. So that's how the podcast was born. So on a bigger picture level and on a more granular level too, I know that I needed to learn these concepts as well, especially when we moved from Calgary to Toronto. Life was more expensive, and I felt like it was really important for us at this stage early on to try and nail some of these concepts down. So that's kind of the genesis of Beyond MD.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's been such a wonderful journey to be sitting alongside you and and seeing where Beyond MD started and where it is today. Like, I did not believe that we would be 77 episodes in, that you would have this network of, now friends across the financial industry and within healthcare, that you've been able to really forge as a result of the podcast, and your just genuine interest in wanting to learn, and then by doing so helping others learn in areas that are opportunities for healthcare professionals to know more about. And so it's been just so fun to see that journey. And also selfishly, I have had to hear less about the finance stuff, because
I
you've
know.
built that network now of friends and colleagues that you can now ask the questions, get the advice, and I just will come in with, a couple words here and there. Most of the time, things that you already know, but are maybe just looking to get validated. So I feel like my role has shifted, but it's totally okay, because I'm seeing that you're flourishing.
That I appreciate that, Sims. And with that, you raise another really important point that I do want to talk about, because I think what's so natural for us is the person that we spend the most time with. So I spend most of my time with you, even though admittedly I will be downstairs in the office tinkering around. Maybe you're in bed watching a show, but I think lately I'm doing a better job. We're spending more time together. But the person that we spend most of our time with, they naturally become a sounding board for everything. And they may not necessarily have the same interests, yet they're an easy access point. So back in the day, I would be coming to you naturally and being like, hey, what do you think of this investment strategy? Or, hey, I'm thinking of putting more money into the RRSP this year. I have some catch up room. Let's talk about it. I remember there was one night we were watching a show. This was earlier in the pandemic. You were about to bite into this piece of pizza. And then I busted out some like financial nonsense at you. And you just kind of looked at me. And in that moment, I was just like, too much, too much. Let's just shut up and watch the show. So, it kind of just hit me then, even though this is the person that I spend the most time with and I love so dearly, they shouldn't be the sounding board for everything. And so Beyond MD has given me that avenue to connect with other people where I talk about the financial stuff. And now we'll talk about this more later, but I think that we as a couple, in terms of, how united we are on how we live our lives, including the financial aspects, I think we are operating much more in unison today, but this can come up later, but I wanted to bring that up as well. I think it's an important point.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I remember that night vividly in the pandemic, where we were about to eat some amazing homemade pizza, and you were like, this is the time in the middle of this show for me to dump this stuff and content on Sima. I'm seizing the opportunity. But anyway, we've come a long way since then. So speaking of a long way, and going back to kind of just talk about the growth and evolution of the podcast, like I personally have seen a lot of tremendous growth in your own financial acumen over the last 3+ years. But I know the journey to get here wasn't necessarily easy. And in the answer before, you mentioned Calgary, which I feel like was just a plethora of learning for us.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to just kind of dive in there. And as you reflect on your journey, what do you feel have been the biggest lessons learned?
Yeah. Maybe I can talk about the financial elements first, and then maybe I can expand it and go beyond that after. So, just in terms of the finance, because I was really clueless. Like when we were, in San Diego, we had little to no income that year, so we'll put that aside. Calgary, we had a healthy income, and I didn't really understand a few important concepts. And those concepts that I'm going to talk about now are basically the amount of money that you can set aside and invest early so that it compounds over time. Really important concepts. Like, I think that had I known that, the nest egg that you are going to grow is dependent really on a couple things. It's how much you're able to set aside and how long you're able to let that money grow over time. Those are really the two big things. And I had no grasp of that. So the podcast certainly put me much more in touch with these concepts. They're very, very simple concepts, but this really boils down to the Pareto principle. So Pareto was an Italian economist, and then through some of his work, people came up with the 80-20 rule. So if you master 20% of the basic concepts, you're probably going to derive 80% of the benefits. So had I just been in tune with the importance of, and I don't like to tell people to live below their means, because let me tell you why. Physicians have a very, very long route. We often don't start earning our income until we're into our early 30s. And so by that time, we're human beings. We have wants, we have needs. We finally, after all these years of rigorous training, we want to spend. So rather than telling people to live below their means, I try to reframe that and say, spend on the things that are really, really important to you, but don't spend on everything. And I think if you live life like that, you will hopefully end up saving some money. And I think the earlier you can take that, put it aside, invest it in a common sense way so that it grows over time, and just don't touch it. Like, don't touch it, just be patient. I think you will get the majority of the benefit just through those simple concepts. And so if I just pivot back to Calgary, I know there are a lot of moving parts. Like Zion, our youngest, he was born there, right? And that's something we learned about there, the pregnancy. And then things changed. I think we ended up, because of that, shifting from our rental, which was relatively cheap and cheerful in the grand scheme of things, to buying a house. And so there was a lot of cash flow going towards the house that we maybe could have invested. Again, it's not going to make us or break us here. But I think when I look back to Calgary, that's one thing I do think about. Oh, maybe we could have kept things a bit simpler and just applied some of these basic investment principles. And it maybe would have put us a small step further ahead financially. So that's one thing I think about. And then in terms of other things, as I am evolving as a person, I'm entering my 9th year of clinical practice. I still love radiology. I still feel very, very grateful to be able to do what I do day to day. But I know, Sima, that there are other things that really make me tick inside as a person. I have to continue finding ways to grow, and that could be both within medicine. So, for example, I think it's really important for a lot of us to take on new roles within our work. So one thing I did a year ago is I became very interested in educating residents and medical students coming into our department. And so I took on a leadership role, Director of Radiology Education at North York General Hospital. That has added so much to my professional life. But at the same time, I think it's really important for us to have some interests on the side that keep our personal lives really exciting. And I can tell you that I even talk to people within my own circle of friends. And obviously, I'm not going to name people here, but some of the things that I hear is, well, when I stop practicing radiology, I don't really know what I would do with my time. And, when I hear that, it saddens me a little bit, because I just think in life, there's so many opportunities. If I can pass on one message to anybody, and this is the message that I really want to pass on to our boys, is, each day is amazing. Each day is beautiful. Treat it like an opportunity to learn and become a more knowledgeable and better person. And I think if you do that, you can discover so many things. Like, I found this financial outlet for me. I love to learn about finance. I absolutely love to learn about investing. Of all the things within finance, I think that's what keeps me the most engaged, but it makes my life so interesting. And as a result, I made it a personal commitment to read at minimum one book a month starting 2 years ago. And that in itself has lifted my life. So financially, those basic concepts, personally, within your professional and personal life, find ways to grow. I found it's made my life a lot more enriching and exciting.
I'm just gonna pause on a statement that you made around, and it's absolutely right in that it's really important to have varied interests and diverse interests outside of kind of what you do day to day. But what I can share based on what I've observed and what you've been able to share with me is that you have been able to build, you already had really great working relationships with all of the physicians that you work with. I'll pick at North York General. But your interest in finance, I feel, has deepened your connections with some of those doctors and physicians, because you actually found that you both had mutual interests in finance outside of medicine. And so I think it's been able to help you create these stronger bonds and deeper trust, because now you have two people who are liking the same thing from 9 to 5 as well as from 5 to 9.
I appreciate that. I mean, I have gotten some phone calls at home, and immediately you see the name on the phone and you're like, okay, they want to talk about a case. Did I miss something on a case? But then it was just a phone call to say, hey, Yathin, I love your podcast. I love this episode. And I was like, okay, this is like, to your point, it's another way to connect with people. And it made me think of one last thing. I do think through my journey, what I've learned is there's many ways to have an impact. When I'm sitting at work looking at cases, I'm having an impact there. But then when I'm recording a podcast and sharing it with a broader audience, through one stroke, you can impact a massive audience that way. And I continue to use the podcast as a way to remind myself of that. There's so many ways to have an impact in life. And, I hope, I know people in my network think like that, but I want to encourage other people to think like that too.
Yeah, I love that. So powerful. So, different question now. You're 77 episodes in today. You have had experts on the podcast ranging across so many different topics, from insurance to education funds, and a million other things, or I guess 74 other things. What you learned, how much of what you've learned on the podcast have you taken and implemented in your life?
That's a great question. I think a really practical question, and people have asked me this at conferences before too, but I think the principles that I've learned and applied fall into about 5 themes. So I'll try to outline them here. So number 1 is common sense investing. And for most people, and what I mean by that is basically spend in the areas that are important to you, not in everything, and the money you have left over, invest it early and in a common sense way and let it run for the long haul. That's something I implemented starting in 2018. Although my strategy has evolved over time, I'm happy to say it's been consistent enough since 2018, so 6 years into it. The next area is, because myself and a lot of my listeners, we are incorporated small business owners, there's another layer to investing, such that you want to do it so that if you're doing it through your corporation, you're doing it in an efficient way. And so I have also followed the principles for efficient investing through a corporation. And the other areas, not neglecting the other key legs of the stool. So we have the financial leg, the personal leg. We have I may have to edit this a little bit, but Andrew Hallam basically has the 4-legged stool of balance. So your finances are important, your relationships are key, your physical health is key. And so when you look at the well-rounded stool, you want to not neglect other parts of your life. And one thing I've kind of learned is, you can achieve success in work in spurts. But if you're only working and neglecting the personal aspects of your life, it's not a recipe for success. So I think you always have to keep those personal elements of your life in check. So Andrew Hallam really helped there. And I will kind of go back for the corporate investing. It was really Jamie Golenbeck and the Looney Doctor who really helped me to think more about that. I've also put into practice how to use credit cards and how to use the points that you accumulate through your expenses to travel the world, because this, for us as a family, has become a real interest. So Ricky Zhang was on the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say our travel life has gotten so much better as a result of you building that knowledge and taking those principles and putting them into action.
Yeah, no, it really has. And I think it's really opened our eyes to an area, an aspect of our life that we truly, truly enjoy. And I think it creates for so much family bonding as well. And the boys are now, as we know, like, they're amazing travelers, right? So,
yes.
So that episode with Ricky on traveling the world efficiently with credit cards, that was amazing. I recently opened up a health spending account as well. So that was one of the more recent episodes that helped me shift my thinking around how to do things in maybe a slightly more tax efficient way. And then on the real estate front, The way I do it has pivoted. As you know, you, Sims, were the wise one who told me, having rental properties is not an easy process. I know you're getting a little excited. Maybe you're getting a little ahead of yourself. So after acquiring 3 properties, I have said full stop, no more, because I appreciate personal time and downtime so much. And that can be a much more active process. Even though there's a property manager in place, you are managing your managers, and it just takes up time and it can drain you. So how I choose to invest in real estate now is much more passively. And so we've had episodes on that as well. So investing, especially through a corporation, a balanced life, credit cards, health spending accounts, real estate, those would be like the 5 to 6 big things that I have actively incorporated into our life, and it's come from the pod.
Yeah, those are amazing. And as I said, we've really benefited as a result of you just deepening your knowledge and understanding in those places. Now, there's also topics that you've had on the podcast that you haven't implemented yet. So, for example, whole life insurance, and I know that there's others. Maybe you can just share kind of some decisions around why you haven't put those
That's a
practices or
really
principles into place.
that is a really good question. I can address whole life insurance specifically. So, for the listeners, I know many of you are already aware, but we have permanent life insurance. And then under that, there are 2 types: whole life insurance, universal life insurance. I think that these products, based on what I understand, they have a few specific roles. But I have been in the camp who believes that the main role is going to be finding a way to transfer funds to the next generation, in a tax efficient way. And I think that those strategies are great, but I think they make more sense to pursue once you don't have too many expenses in your own life, once you have less mortgage debt, once your other investment vehicles have been maximized. So, excuse me, I will kind of take our personal situation. So we still have a mortgage that we're paying off. I am still catching up on my RSP contributions, my TFSA contributions. And so I have those other buckets to take care of. I think once those buckets are taken care of, not completely, but to the most part, then I can start to think about another instrument such as permanent life insurance or whole life insurance. I think it fulfills a specific need. I'm trying to think of what else. Oh yeah, the other one that we've come across is pensions for incorporated professionals. And I think that pensions can be a reasonable thing, very reasonable thing in the right setting. I think for people who are looking into it, I have 3 episodes, but you ideally should be over 40 years of age. And you ideally need to have enough money in the corporation to contribute to these pensions. And it can be a really, really useful tool for tax deferred growth using your corporate assets. But again, it makes more sense once you're beyond age 40. And also, it makes more sense once you're kind of okay to introduce some more complexity into your life. And right now, because again, I haven't maxed out my RSP, I'll probably do that first before I consider pension. So these are things that I would tell people to learn about, but I would tell them to, or I would guide them to consider them maybe a little bit later in the process once these more basic accounts are optimized first.
Yeah, it's helpful, right? It's good to be, it's really important to be transparent about the things that you've taken and done right away, and then also talk about the areas that you believe in, like whole life or pension, but you might just not be ready today to
Yeah,
execute
exactly.
or kind of to implement those practices. But as you said, it's so important just to have kind of a basic or even intermediate understanding of these topics so that when you're ready to pull the trigger, you can.
Yeah, and also educating yourself so that when the time comes, you're asking the right questions, so you're getting the best service possible. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you kind of started to go there a little bit, but when you were talking about investment strategies around kind of holding something for a long time versus kind of buying and selling or acting quicker. If I just reflect on you and I'm definitely the type of person that I have a stock portfolio and I let that ride. I don't check it. I honestly, I'm pretty laid back about kind of what's happening there, where you are definitely more on top of it. You're in Yahoo Finance every day. You're reading the ups and downs, and you're sharing with me kind of the ups and downs of different stocks. Um, but it's helpful. It's really useful to have that balance and to surround yourself with people who have kind of differing views or differing approaches, because it just can bring to light a way that you may not have thought about. Or for me, you bring the latest breaking news, and I'm like, oh, I need to go, buy Nvidia tomorrow because stock is going to drop. So
You know what? I'll clarify a few things there. So let's be clear. Your investment returns are better than mine. And I think part of it is you don't touch your portfolio. You just kind of let it ride. And I really do believe that's a big part of it. Now, the other thing is, yes, I do keep in touch with the day to day or the week to week. I would say that's because it's a personal hobby for me. I like to stay engaged, especially with the individual companies that I hold. But I do want people to know that that's not, for me at least, a recipe to act. But I think for the vast majority of people, and this has happened to me too, if I'm too on top of the day to day, you can hear some noise, and that can be a recipe to act, and you can end up regretting it down the road. So yeah, you want to have a balanced approach. I would advocate for most people to probably check less frequently. And one thing you said, Sims, that reminded me of the actions that I have implemented through the podcast. One is also charitable gifting. So I know you and I talk about that, and we've had conversations, and we still talk about it. Like, if we were going to support a charity today, who would we support? And we did this recently for Rohin's birthday when he turned 10. We talked to him about it, and he made the decision to forego gifts from his friends and instead accept donations to charity, which I thought was lovely. And it's something that I'm really happy we're talking to the boys about early.
yeah, I mean, it really speaks to the power of your kids listen and absorb way more than you think that they are when you're all with each other having these conversations. And yeah, Rohin so admirably decided to collect money and donate to a charity for his birthday. But I'm even seeing some of the lessons coming through the kids in different ways. For example, when we were in New York, and when we were flying home to come back to Toronto, we decided to take the subway, and then we decided to hop on what we didn't know was a free bus to LaGuardia. We stepped into the airport, I think spending all of like $20 to get there. And Rohan turned to me and he was like, Mommy, we just spent $20 to get from Manhattan to Queens
Yeah, I
LaGuardia
know.
Airport.
Yeah.
He was like, that is amazing. And I was like, what? I thought you were talking about buying candy, but you want to talk to me about this? Like, it was an incredible kind of eye-opening conversation that I was able to have with Rohan being 9 at the time. Just a small example to show that, kids they're always absorbing and listening to what we're saying, even when we don't realize that they are.
Totally. And that'll taking me back to New York. We were there in a heat wave, right? So we were walking around a lot, toughing it out. And there was a lot of amazing ice cream and gelato. But I do remember on one day in Brooklyn, we decided to instead go to a supermarket and we just bought like a box of popsicles, right? And we said, you know what? Let's just take a break from the gelato. Sometimes 4 gelatos, 4 people, $40. Let's just go to a popsicle, $8 for a box of popsicles. And it was almost just as enjoyable. But, I think that the kids still appreciated it. They had fun. And I think there are small lessons to extract from this. So, yeah, I like that we did that in New York. And maybe, Sims, I'll just pivot now a little bit. And I wanted to ask you a question because when I look at that subway trip, we decided to take the subway all the way from Manhattan over to LaGuardia. And I have to say, if I remember correctly, I think you were the one who was really pushing for that idea. And when I look at like how we have evolved as a couple, I think that as the years have gone by, I see us now as certainly being more aligned when it comes to life decisions, financial decisions. But I wanted to get your take on how do you think we are evolving as a couple in this respect?
Oh, I love that question. Uh, And before I answer, I'll wrap the LaGuardia bus story. It came to a point where it was like a challenge for me, and I love a challenge. So
Mm.
the challenge was, how can we get to LaGuardia in the most cost-effective way? Because we also had a lot of time, so I knew we weren't rushing. We kind of had a few hours to find our way to get there. So for me, it was a personal challenge to get that done, which is why I was like so persistent, even when you were like, "Oh, well, let's take an Uber," and I'm like, "We're not taking an Uber. We're taking the subway, and we're taking this free bus, and that's just how it's going to be." But that aside, yeah, I would definitely agree. I think that we are operating more aligned. I think we are listening to each other more and being more open-minded to a potentially, different way to look at investments or finance or just kind of money together. And I think a lot of that is because we have gone through together our own learning journey. And we've had experiences that have really kind of opened our eyes to our own level of kind of like being naive when it comes to money matters, that we've had to go through those experiences. I know we've talked about Calgary, but like Calgary comes top of mind when we um, decided to sell our house in Calgary in order to move back to Toronto. Um, in hindsight, we should have rented the house in
I
Calgary. We probably
know.
would have
We
done
talk
really
about that.
well.
Yeah,
It would have been
I
a,
know.
really fruitful investment for us, but we didn't know any different. Or like another Calgary story, when we decided we had to break our mortgage. We didn't know that when you break a mortgage, you have to pay a penalty. And so like, that penalty affected us a little bit
Hmm.
financially. Kind of
Hmm.
we were that much less, we had that much less in our bank account to bring over with us to Toronto. But we had to kind of go through those experiences to learn and do better the next time. And so when we've gotten mortgages since Calgary, like, we are way smarter about it. We definitely do more research. We make sure we find the right, broker or kind of financial institution to help us. And I think it's helped. It's actually been quite beneficial for us. If I just pick on like the more like mortgages alone. And I think there's other examples too, like when it comes to investing, like we talked about, like my strategy is buy, hold, never check. Eventually, there's going to be ups and downs, but eventually you're probably going to come out on top. Where your strategy is a little bit different. You do buy and hold, but you do check and you do kind of top up when the time is right. And I think um, I've learned from that, because that also it's proven to be successful for you, that
Hmm.
strategy. I mean, so many
Hmm.
people do that, right? So many people are in either camp. Um, but I think it's just us being able to have these really kind of open conversations around what we're doing and sharing with each other the decisions that we're going to make before we go and do them, so that each other is kind of tracking and we can kind of offer our 2 cents or our opinions there. I think that's really helped. I think maturity is that's another thing that's also obviously comes as you get older, but just learning more, understanding more, and having different experiences. I think for us has just like made us more in sync.
I love that. And I'm going to go back to that Calgary example for just a second. So you mentioned that when we broke our fixed rate mortgage there, we suffered a penalty. I remember that day. You sent me an email like exclamation mark, exclamation mark, like I can't believe this. Like we have to pay an $8,000 penalty to break this home. And remember, this is a time in our lives when we were just really beginning to earn an income. So any hit like this, it was a true hit. And we felt it. But I also remember that day and the next day, like I was really unhappy. I was sweating buckets. Like yeah. And I think if I can just take this example and compare how I reacted and how you reacted, for you, it was that initial hit, but you got over it really quickly. And for me, it lingered, it persisted. So if I can say there's one attribute that you taught me in life that's really important, it's to take things, process them, but once these things happen, you have to let them roll off the shoulder. It's water under the bridge after a certain point. And Sims, I have to say that's the most important thing that you have taught me. So I wanted people to know that. And I thought maybe I could flip the script here and maybe just say like what would you say in our 13 years together, what's the most important thing that I've taught you?
Ooh, that's a great question. I feel like you've taught me so much, but one thing comes to the top of my mind, and that is I really respect and admire how much you want to learn about things outside of your immediate domain. Like your level of intellectual curiosity and hunger to learn is amazing. And not only learn, but also share with others. There is one thing to kind of do your own reading, keep all the information to yourself, but you act to find the ways in which to educate the people around you, be it me, or the kids or your colleagues or your listeners through the podcast. Like you really want to spread knowledge and awareness, and I think that it's remarkable. And I think you finding ways to continue to do that, which you're doing through being director of education at North York General, through the podcast, through kind of doing presentations for your physician colleagues around Toronto and Ontario. Like you found these avenues where you're really letting your passion come to life and thrive. And I think that has been incredible.
I really appreciate that. I'll be thinking about that as we head off into our brief vacation here. I really appreciate that.
Of course. Okay, so now it's my turn again. I thought it'd be kind of fun to ask you. We talked a lot about your lessons and what you've done and haven't done with the podcast. But you've also had a lot of really just interesting episodes in general, and would love to hear from you as the host of Beyond MD.
Hmm.
What was your favorite episodes or set of episodes, and why?
Okay, great question. I think the one guest, after studying their work for quite some time, that I was most excited to host on the podcast was Andrew Hallam, bar none. I've been such a fan of his work, Millionaire Teacher, Balance, such phenomenal books. I think that Balance could be a curriculum book for every resident in medicine. Like if you have that alongside your medical curriculum, I think you're going to be set up for success. That's why I like to share that book with anyone I meet. So I was also nervous to interview Andrew, but he's such a nice guy that it was a fun conversation. So for me, that was a personal favorite, and I think also to date probably the most popular episode. But I do want to acknowledge a few other people and a few other episodes. So it wouldn't have started without Ali Spinner being willing to come on the podcast and just share all those pearls about incorporating. And I've had her on a few more times since. When Jamie Golenbeck messaged me back, I was on this bike ride. I saw this email come in. Jamie was like, "Yeah, I'd love to come on your show." I was just like, "What? Really? Okay." So let's get him on the show. And then he and his team sharing the pod, that really gave it some legs early on. And then I will say that the concepts he talked about investing through your corporation, I had Mark South, the Looney Doctor, come on and expand on those topics, which were also a big hit. And then I will say that Ricky Zhang coming on the podcast and just enlightening us about how to travel the world through the points that you accumulate, like too good to be true, not too good to be true, it's real. So that was very impactful for us, and I know a lot of listeners benefited too. And I'll give a shout out to one more episode. It was my friend Matt Pointer when he came on. I think it was episode 44. He talked about his path to financial freedom, traveling the world, and all the lessons he learned. Those episodes for me, if I can go back to and listen to again, extract lessons, those are really memorable for me.
Yeah, yeah, those are all fantastic episodes. And I know Andrew Hallam's book Balance. I think you bought what 50 copies of those books, and
Yeah.
anyone that's lucky will get a copy of it,
Yeah.
including myself and the boys. You gifted us each our own copy, which is also very very generous
Yeah,
of you. I know.
yeah, absolutely. There was one day where Zine was cleaning out his room. He got rid of every book, and then he left Balance on his bookshelf. I took a picture of it. I sent it to Andrew, and he had a hoot. Like it was hilarious. That Balance is like it's everywhere in our house.
Yeah, it is. And I'm actually gonna when we for this weekend I'm gonna start it. So I'm really excited to get into it and take away
Yeah,
all
you're
of
gonna
the
love
things
it.
that you've. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. But on the topic of books, so I guess it was 2 Decembers ago, you decided to put yourself up to a challenge, and that was to read a book a month. And
Hmm.
so you have read a number of books now, both in within the finance realm, personal wellness, well-being. What are some of your favorite books that you've read that you would
Hmm.
strongly recommend to your listener base?
Great question.
Of course,
I
balance is on
I
there,
would
but
recommend
outside of
Balance
balance.
100%. I think everybody should read that book. Like Sima, my mom liked Balance. Like the fact that my mom liked Balance, I think that speaks volumes about the book. So, in addition to Balance, there's two more that I'm going to mention. One is The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. Now, this is not for everyone because it's told in fiction format to illustrate some really important concepts. And what Robin is getting to in that book is that if you craft a life where you are allowing yourself time every single day, just time to yourself to exercise, allow time for creativity, allow time for meditation or whatever it is that you need to be your best self. If you make that time every day, it's going to pave the way to a more enjoyable and more successful life. And so I feel like in the last month I have been working really really hard to get up early, and I know that when I find that time for myself in the mornings, my day is better. And I know I get more done. I find that the nights are less productive, the mornings are more productive, and I think part of the reason is another thing I've learned about is that we all have willpower, but that willpower is finite, even though we don't want to believe that it is. And so if you exert willpower on many tasks during the day, maybe in the morning, maybe in the afternoon, well, guess what? I found for myself, by the time the evening comes around, I have less willpower to really get down to it and get something done that's important. So that's why the principles from the 5 a.m. club really resonate with me. Get up early. The most important things that you want to do, get them done first. So I love that book. And the third book I'm going to mention is the book I'm reading right now. It's a page turner for me, 100 Baggers by Christopher Mayer. So I'm halfway through the book. I'm going to finish it on the flight tonight. And it is basically a study of the stocks that have returned 100x, so 100 times the initial investment. What are the characteristics of these stocks? What do we need to be looking for behind the scenes? Again, people have asked me, why do you do this when you could just buy a simple index fund, ride it out for life? For me, it's more the pursuit of knowledge, the intellectual stimulation, and it's a true hobby. And this is actually what's led me to recently start an investment club. So I started an investing club. There's 5 of us in the club. We're already having great conversations, but these are the 3: Balance, 5 a.m. Club, and 100 Baggers, my 3 favorites to date.
Amazing. We'll have to drop those names and authors in the show
Yeah,
notes so that
absolutely.
folks can
Yeah.
get it. Okay, I feel like we're nearing close to time, so I just have a couple more questions, and they're a bit kind of more fun in nature. So, um, who would be your dream podcast guest?
Hmm. If I had to pick one, I would really love to have Scott Galloway, Prof G, on the pod. He is somebody who has inspired me. I love that he's so just open and honest with his own personal journey on wealth building and what he's learned in life. So his show, the Prof G Show, is one of the podcasts that I do listen to regularly. There's very few pods that I listen to regularly, but his is one. If I had to pick one, it'd be him, but I want to add 2 more people. Lynn Alden, who is just phenomenally bright. She didn't even start off in finance, but she has a service that she runs, but she offers this free newsletter every month that is better than most paid services, in my opinion. She talks about everything: macro, individual stocks, what she's doing, gold. She's just knowledgeable in everything. I would love to have her on the show, and I'm hoping that I can. And if I could just add a third person, it would be some kind of legendary investor who everybody looks out to, who's returned well beyond the markets over time. And so, one example of that type of investor, I know Warren Buffett is now well into his 90s. Never say never, but somebody like even Howard Marks, but somebody in that genre, a legendary investor. Those would be my 3.
Oh, those all sound amazing, and I would never say never. You
Never
may
say never.
one way find an opportunity to have these amazing individuals on your podcast. Okay, last question is a forward-looking question.
Hmm.
Uh, you've built you've built Beyond MD. You're 77 episodes in now. I know you're thinking and planning for kind of what the next horizon for Beyond MD will look like.
Hmm.
But how do you see it? How do you see the podcast evolving as you continue to deepen your own knowledge and understanding of personal finance?
That's a great question. Well, the podcast for sure is going to continue. I think it's just such a part of my fabric and identity now. It used to be quite a challenge for me to put out an episode, but now my rule really is I have so many interesting conversations with people. Whenever I have a conversation that I think is going to be worthwhile, I just hit the record button. We record the conversation and we share it. So I'm probably going to be bringing out more specific topics. I might be bringing out a few more deep dives. I might even, I've thought about this, maybe like behind the scenes, if people want to take it one step further and get access to knowledge that's maybe a bit more curated to their own situation. I've thought about maybe why not introduce another layer where we can go deeper and make it a bit more personal. I've also thought of maybe holding a meetup where I can connect with my listeners. I'd still love to do that one day because, as easy as it is to get access to information remotely, I think people really crave that personal connection. So I'd love to maybe make that an element of Beyond MD where we maybe meet up from time to time. I think the investment club that I've started is just an arm of that. And yeah, I think those are really, really kind of it. But it's a true part of my identity. It's a great way for me to continue learning and continue to share knowledge with the world. And yeah, I mean, I even look forward to seeing where Beyond MD goes. But those are just some ideas I have in mind.
Those all sound amazing, and I'll just maybe end on as a very proud wife, I am so in awe of what you've been able to create, what you're giving back to the world as a result of your passion and personal interest. And it's been such a wonderful thing to see unfold. And I know that you are going to continue to have such an impact on all of those people that tune in, that listen, that attend your talks, well into the future. And so I just want to say I'm really, really proud of you for all that you've done. And you're an amazing human being. And I'm so happy that you have this platform to be able to give all that is you to the world.
Sims, that means a lot to me. And I just also want people to know that these things, taking on new pursuits, pursuing new adventures, it's only possible and it's only enjoyable when you have people to share it with and people who are supporting you along the way. So you've been a huge source of support for me along the way. Like the way I tell people is when we first met and we first started our own journey, you were like the energizer. You were like the energizer bunny. You would energize me, inject energy into me all the time. And even today, you have such an amazing, beautiful, radiant personality. And, you may not know it, but you inject positive energy into all of us every day, myself, Rohan, Zion, and we feed off that, right? Like we take that and it helps us in our day and it helps us to think bigger. It certainly helped me to think bigger. And so I just want you to know that's something I think about and I don't take for granted. So thank you for the support along the way.
Oh, so sweet. Thank you. I so much appreciate it.
Sims, this was a lot of fun. And my hope is that we can reconnect for episode 100. We'll make it a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. I'm down anytime you need a co-host. You know where to find me. Just call me up, talk to my assistant, and I'll make sure you get in calendar.
All right. That sounds amazing. Okay. Until next time.